Chapter 6. Phora.
The friends made their way back to the stream and through the storm water drain thoughtfully.
Did you see that scene? When I asked Nakas how far in the future we would know about his dimension.
Yes, but it went by in a flash. What did you see?
I stood in an arena. A big man, at least I think it was me, holding a broken sword. My adversary's sword was intact, and he held it as one who had lived by the sword. In the stands stood a golden goddess, more beautiful than any woman I've ever seen. She was dressed as a warrior and held a shimmering sword aloft, with her outstretched arm pointing it at the sky. She wanted to give me her sword because mine was broken. There was a close connection between us, as if I knew her very well, possibly loved her a long time before, but had thought I'd never see her again.
Perhaps she was your commanding officer from the electric swordsmen of Rowan, the one who used to give you your mission orders.
Maybe, but she held an ancient sword, not an electric sword, even older than the one I was using in the arena. It seemed to be her though, in my future, the next dimension where Nakas comes from.
I think it's your past.
No, it's definitely the future. If it was my old commanding officer, I've never seen her in that amazing body before. And believe me, no one could ever forget such an outstanding woman. Besides, I know my past. The scene was very different from the electric swordsman of Rowan. Why do you think it was the past?
Because I saw myself in the picture as well.
Oh?
I saw the picture as you did, but there was also a child in the stands. I think that child was me.
How do you know it was you? And why do you think it was the past?
I don't know, just a feeling, like yours, that you are the gladiator with the broken sword, and it's the future. Remember, Nakas indicated that some of that dimension is in the past. I've never been able to remember previous lifetimes, and this was my first glimpse. There are secrets as well as priceless knowledge tied up in my past. Knowledge we desperately need in this dimension, here on Delta 4B. I know this now. It came through to me with the picture.
Zentran considered Zack's introspection for a while.
Can it be that somehow my future and your past are linked?
Besides the intensity, their brief encounter with Nakas had been thought-provoking. Zentran wondered why his ex-commanding officer was not to brief him on his mission, considering she had summoned him. It seemed Nakas knew his mission data, but had abstained from informing him. The part staring him in the face every sequence, as Nakas had put it, was obviously the plight of his people. To put that right would require taking on the council. Even with Zack's assistance, they weren't strong enough for that yet. Zentran waited a while for Zack to emerge from the storm water entry in the aircar pad before following. His parents greeted him at home. They chose not to inquire where he'd been. Zentran didn't mistake their unasked question for complacency. They knew what he was about. Tact served as an example he'd benefited from. It was allowing him and Zack to develop. He considered the encounter with Nakas and the Qutons frequently, especially when overlooking the stream on the dark side of the hill. Zack's participation became less frequent. He'd been shaken by the encounter in the depths of the dark zone more than he cared to reveal. It would take longer for him to appreciate its inspiration the way Zentran had. Other interests contributed to his absence. Time invested in pursuit of a full-blooded boy's path to manhood. He was becoming more acquainted with girls and their delightful ways. Zentran hadn't found these activities obligatory, Not that he was immune to female charm. Training held his interest, and he missed Zach's participation. Sometimes, when Zach joined him, he shrugged previous absence off with a grin.
Pressures and demands of social life.
Zentran laughed. They understood each other. Much like before they'd become friends, Zentran continued to train mostly on his own. He'd come to know the magnitude of Zach's inherent ability and the level of development his friend had reached. Occasionally, he climbed to the top of the rise a little way from the stream. From there, he could look across the expanse of desert to the city. He considered walking boldly across it. In itself, this wasn't the goal, but a symbolic statement that they were taking on the council. He wasn't ready yet. He wouldn't even make it halfway across before being arrested in the Forbidden Zone. Sometimes, Zentran ventured into the depths of the darkness, trying to make contact with Nakas, but only found Qtons there. Even going further than on their first encounter, he couldn't sense the entity's presence. Communicating with Qtons became interesting. If he kept the subject matter simple, they could understand each other quite well. It was curious that they had this capacity, considering his fellow man had lost the ability to transfer mental ideas. Affinity developed between them. In a way, Qtons became a substitute for his more socially conscious friend. Getting to know them gave him insight as to Nakas's purpose in seeing to their well-being. Was Nakas's continued absence an indication that he'd left their protection to him now? Qtons never ventured to the stream where the storm water drain exited. Being close to the twilight sector produced too much light for their sensitive eyes. They preferred darker places downstream where the gurgling water ran over waterfalls into a series of pools. The sight of overhanging rocks reflecting in the crystal clear water, illuminated by the glow of Qton eyes, would wake even a dreary soul. There, Zentran learnt to swim. On subsequent visits, he put his training to use, erecting a stone dwelling, his true home. Zach would have considered it pointless, but Zentran found it inspiring to put his mental exercise to creative use. Qtons observed the progress curiously. Exchanging thoughts, Zentran explained its purpose. He laughed when they humoured him. Playfully, he tossed a stone through an opening which served as a window to experience the sound it made, falling into the pool below. With its splash, he sensed something else, Zach's approaching presence. Zentran hurried to meet him at the storm water outlet. En route, he sensed another presence with Zach. Zentran's concern at Zach's carelessness didn't go unnoticed. Zach knew he'd taken a risk. In the partial darkness, Zentran caught sight of them. Zach's companion was a girl. Being undeniably attractive was of no consequence to Zentran.
Your weakness for a female's attributes will be your undoing.
Zach offered nothing in response.
Perhaps with this, both are undoing. This is an indulgence we can't afford.
Zach's guilt, little though it was accompanied by amusement.
Please just go along with it, Zentran. She's here now. Hi, Zentran,
Zach said aloud, indicating nothing of Zentran's disagreement.
Oh, hi, Zach.
Answered Zentran, as if they hardly knew each other and had just met by accident.
I'd like you to meet Phora.
Zach continued.
Phora, this is Zentran.
Zentran turned to look at the girl standing next to Zach. Phora was attractive in a cute sort of way. He looked into her eyes and was about to greet her when he realized she was picking up everything mentally as well. Suddenly, he felt embarrassed at his mental outburst. Lack of experience with the opposite sex further complicated the situation. He was lost for words, as well as ideas to communicate mentally with. Zack, clearly amused, filled the silence.
Phora can do something you can do.
He paused before continuing.
She can remember her past lifetimes.
Zentran was taken aback. He stared at the girl with new interest.
Pleased to meet you, Zentran.
Said Phora with a smile. She was also surprised. She'd never paid any attention to Zentran at instruction class. On rare occasions, when she'd given him a fleeting glance, she'd noticed nothing noteworthy. At this unusual introduction, she wondered how Zack even knew him, let alone be his friend. It didn't add up. Even more strangely, what she'd considered to be a non-entity turned out to be a mental powerhouse. She'd been mildly curious of Zack, but even her estimation of him was taking on a different form. There was a lot more going on here than she had ever imagined. New interest in Zentran inspired her to find out what he was about. Beneath the recluse facade lay a quality of character she found fascinating. Zentran was still reeling and having difficulty recovering. The girl took on a different appearance to him now that he paid her proper attention. He'd never done that before, looked at a girl that way. There was an attractiveness about her that went beyond her picture-perfect blonde hair, pale blue eyes, and cute smile. Even her plain instruction class clothes couldn't conceal the curves of the athletic body beneath. Something happened inside him. A radiance shone through her beingness, penetrating his seclusion. He was pleased it had happened here, at the beginning of the Dark Zone.
I'm pleased to meet you as well, Phora.
He replied eventually, for he sensed in her the same person as his ex-commanding officer from the elite electric swordsmen of Rowan.